What's up, Achievers? Jason Pack here, and today we're talking about 3 tips to improve your deadlift. Alright, so I have to leave to jump on a train in about 15 minutes or so this week's Technique Tuesday is going to be really quick. Alright, so here are 3 tips in order to improve your conventional deadlift. Tip number 1 involves 3 different constants that we're always looking at when we're deadlifting. Constant number 1 is that we want to establish a hinge versus a squat while deadlifting. What a hinge entails is that your shoulders should be above your hips and your hips should be above your knees. We don't want to confuse this with a squat movement where your shoulders are above your hips, but your hips are below your knees. By squatting your deadlifts, you end up putting yourself in a worse leverage position because now the bar has to travel out in front of you and your hips are not in an optimal position to pull the bar off the floor. Alright, so constant number 2 is making sure that you can establish the bar directly over the middle of your foot. Now, a lot of people can get really confused by this because if you look straight down at your foot, what you see is this sort of space between your ankle as well as your toes. But when you look only at that point, you're missing a whole entire section of your heel right here. So in order to really properly identify where the middle of your foot should be, you need to really take a look at your foot from the side, the profile, and then from there draw a line directly down the middle, and that's where the barbell should be. That positioning places the bar directly in the middle of your base of support and makes for a much more efficient lift. Now, constant number 3 is that we want the armpit directly in line with the bar cap. If you're too far forward over the bar, or if you're too behind the bar, that throws you off balance and also puts you in a less leveraged position to efficiently lift up the barbell. Some people might deadlift with a slightly higher hip hinge, some people might deadlift with a slightly lower hip hinge, but as long as you're hinging and not squatting the movement, and as long as the barbell is directly in the middle of your foot and the bar cap is in line with your armpits, then that means you're set up in a good position for you. So tip number 2 is thinking about pushing rather than pulling. So this one can be a little bit confusing because the deadlift is commonly referred to as a pulling exercise. And while that might be the case, and we actually categorize it that way at Achieve as a pulling exercise, thinking about pushing rather than pulling invokes a much stronger reaction and much stronger effect. When people only think about pulling on the barbell, what ends up happening is people end up overusing their arms or overusing their lower back, and they really take their legs out of the equation. Instead, what we cue our members with is we want them to pull up on the bar and also lower their hips slightly down and think about wedging themselves between the barbell and the floor and then pushing their legs directly down into the floor. By positioning themselves this way and really thinking about driving into the floor with their legs, they now use a lot more leg drive rather than just purely relying on their arms and their back. Tip number 3 is about hearing the click. So there's a common phrase when referred to deadlifting in powerlifting circles, which is pulling the slack out of the bar. Now, initially when I first started lifting, it was a little bit confusing for me to understand what that actually meant. What you want to think about is the diameter of the plate that you're loading onto the barbell is going to be wider than the barbell because you actually have to slide it on. So I'm going to use these 2 objects I just found in the room. It's a roll of tape as well as pins. So let's say that this container is the barbell and this roll of tape is your plate, and you're putting that directly through. Now there's a little bit of a gap because you can actually squeeze it through. So pulling the slack out of the bar and hearing the click, all that means is that you're pushing the container or the barbell directly up against the edge of the plate. In some cases, when there's a ton of weight on the bar, you'll see powerlifters actually start to bend the bar before the plates even pick up off the floor because they're pulling so much slack out of the barbell. So it can be helpful to think about it as a pre-pull during your setup before you actually pull the barbell off the floor. When you don't pull the slack out of the barbell, or you don't hear the click, or you don't pre-pull the bar, you're basically gonna have a lot of wasted movement right when you think about pulling the barbell because you still have to account for that slack. So make sure to take your time in the setup to really set yourself up properly, wedge, hear the click, and then push your legs directly into the floor, and that's going to lead to a really strong and forceful movement. So those are the 3 tips I have for you today. I hope they help out your deadlift. If you like this video, please hit that little thumbs up icon below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, peace, love, and muscles.